chair of the Community and Economic Development Committee, and Mr. Hendricks is also on the committee. And Mr. Glazer was on the committee, so we have an opening, so we'll see where that goes next week. So I turn the meeting over to Mr. Grady.
Thank you, Mr. President. We are going to start this committee right now. Hope everybody's ready. We have a couple of items on the agenda. We have 2 bills, and we have a discussion in regards to lead exposure. So we're going to start with Bill 3. Mr. Clerk, will you please read Bill 3?
Bill 3 amends the Property Rehab and Maintenance Code, fire alarm and detection systems by adding provisions for certain multifamily dwellings or attached garages to install carbon monoxide detectors in the vicinity of bedrooms, or the appliance where the presence of fossil burning fuels exists, to bring the code into compliance with State Act 121.
Thank you, Mr. Clerk. I'd like to give an opportunity for anybody in council who'd like to say anything before I ask the administration to explain the bill. Anybody in council?
Yeah, I have one.
Go right ahead, sir.
How does this change what's currently in place now? The state law has changed requiring the carbon monoxide detector, is that correct? And anything else changed from what we're currently working under?
We had nothing before, so in the department.
Nothing regarding carbon monoxide
That's
detector,
correct.
where this makes it mandatory then?
That's correct.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. I'd like to ask the administration then to explain the bill.
Okay, now we're asking for carbon
Say your
monoxide.
name again, please.
Okay, Howard Devine, Director, Living Standards and Safety.
Right, thank you.
Okay. What the bill asks for is either battery operated or interconnected carbon monoxide smoke pattern. Carbon monoxide detectors, and it can be either dual smoke detectors and carbon monoxide, interconnected, or just plain battery operated. Either outside each sleeping area and next to the fossil burning device, whether it be a furnace or hot water heater.
And I thought that, well, some municipalities require a smoke detector in every room. Does it make provision for that?
But this is to be outside sleeping areas. That's what we want this. So in the hallway, carbon monoxide, that's what we need to be located, not inside the sleeping area.
But not in the bed, I mean, not in the kitchen. Well, in the kitchen, you would need one, I'm assuming.
No, be outside, nowhere's in the hallway, in the sleeping area, and by the furnace, outside the furnace.
Okay.
So the 2 actually work together.
All right. Anything else? Anybody including the members who are not in the committee, Mr. McLean? No, sir. Thank you. Anybody from the public?
Yeah, I would like to say something.
We'll be right up there. I'm sorry, he was already walking.
Ken Havenchecker, 733 North 11th, Allentown Tenant Association. Multifamily, as in how many families does it take to, this is, I guess, a requirement now? To be a requirement?
It will be a requirement once the law.
Multifamily, but we have a lot of single family rental dwellings here that are just as neglected as some of the others, so I'm just curious how many units have to be there in order for this to, I guess, take place?
To be effective.
How many units does the building take? Personally, I believe every unit should have one, or every building should have one.
It says single family all the way up. So all.
Oh, okay, right here, it says multifamily.
No, it's a single family and multifamily.
Okay, my bad. All right, thank you.
Yep.
Thank you. Go ahead, madam. Name and address, please.
My name is Renee Velasquez. I live at 1649 Sidesville Road, Bethlehem, PA 18015, but I manage North 11th Street 143. I am the landlord. My question to you is, when we remodeled North 11th Street in the historic, we put intertwined smoke detectors in. So if there's a fire downstairs, everybody's gonna be alarmed that there's a fire. Is that gonna be the same thing that you would like to have done where it's intertwined? That if it's going off downstairs, the other 4 apartments are gonna be aware that there's something going on?
When they make devices, the actually will gas right into this interconnected already, so in order to change one head out,
Okay.
there's still a combination smoke and carbon monoxide detection, so it'd be easy to do actually.
Okay, that's what I wanted to make sure. Something that can be staying intertwined with
Yep.
everybody,
Yep.
so that way the whole building is safe.
Exactly.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Anybody else from the public? If not, I'd like to get a motion forward, Mr. Hendricks.
Tony, you too.
Yeah, Mr. Hendricks, to move forward. February.
Yes, I'll make a motion that this be moved forward to the full committee with a favorable.
Recommendation, right? I'll second that, all in favor, please respond to say aye.
Aye.
Thank you. All right, so we're gonna move this favorably to the whole committee, to the whole board, and so it'll be the next, I think we're gonna put it for the next council meeting. Okay. All right, how about Bill 7, Mr. Clerk, Mr. Hanlon, please.
Bill 7 amends the 2016 general fund budget by deleting the position of housing coordinator at 11N and adding the position of office manager 9N in the Bureau of Building Standards and Safety.
Okay,
Let me begin on a more macro scale. Mr. President, you saw last night the introductions of released of Bill 6, 7, 8, and 9. Proposals that I call some musical chairs that some of the bureau managers and department heads have requested in terms of either workload justifications or savings to the general fund. What you have before you tonight specifically is Bill 7, which eliminates the housing coordinator in George's shop and creates the office manager position. I think the savings are almost $10,000 in that, and the gentleman here tonight, George is here tonight, to talk about the justifications for that. And with that, I'll hand off to George.
Okay.
His green is on.
Okay. In our office, over the last several years, the increase of our units has consistently gone up quite a bit. I know when I first started as an inspector, we went from 17,000 roughly, we're up over 25,000. The problem we're faced in our office is we have 12 inspectors and we have 3 clerks there to handle all of those inspectors, all the notices, the pre-sales inspections, and all the complaints that come out, or through our office, I should say. And they're just overwhelmed, I'll be honest with you. If one takes off for 2 clerks to try and run that office, it's difficult to say the least. As a matter of fact, in the past, we've had to hire temporary help so that we could catch up and pay overtime. It would really benefit if we had an office manager. That person could pick up some of the duties I did as a coordinator. First and foremost would be the DCR process. Person could do, along with assisting at the window and keeping track of something I put in place as far as the stats go. I create a log sheet for the inspectors. As they go through their day, they fill out what they do. She can now take that and enter it, and that's how we work with our stats for monthly and at the end of the year, as far as how many inspections were done, re-inspections, complaints, how many buildings were tagged, things of that nature. I, as the supervisor, will pick up the other portion of what the coordinator did as far as keeping up with the ICC. They change their codes every 3 years, and what we don't want to do in our office is supersede the ICC code. That's new construction. We don't want that to change, and sometimes they actually lessen a restriction. And we don't want to come in after new construction of any sort as a housing inspector and make them change that because ours supersedes it. So we've always tried to keep it in line with new construction, certainly not more stringent. That I would continue to do. I would pick up on the right to knows, which is what Carmen had done before. So I think it would benefit us if we had that 4th person at what I call the front end of our office. That would be now we have a clerk out for, it's gonna be a couple months, having surgery, and we're down to 2 people. The bills just went out. We're getting phone calls like crazy. This week, there are times we couldn't take phone calls, I'll be honest with you. There'd be someone at the counter. So it would really be helpful. It's something that would benefit us, and we could be more efficient.
It saves money.
I'm sorry?
And it would save money.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think $9,000 to $10,000.
Thank you. Anybody from the dais? Go ahead, Mr.
Is it George?
Yes,
George
Mellencamp, I'm sorry.
Carmen and George, welcome.
Yes, yes.
Congratulations on promotions.
Yeah.
Thank you.
You'll do a fine job, I'm sure. So who's the housing coordinator now?
We don't have one.
You don't have one. So how can we delete if we don't have one?
Well, I guess what they're doing is downgrading, I don't know how that all works. It's,
No, I mean, I'm not trying to trick you, I'm just thinking,
Yeah.
we're gonna delete a housing coordinator, I thought there was like a
it's in the
name.
budget for this year. I just got this position.
Okay.
I was gonna be the coordinator, maybe that helps.
He was the court.
I wasn't,
the
that's what my assumption was, I didn't
Yeah, I'm
want
sorry,
to.
yes.
No, that's okay.
It's gonna
Okay.
be deleted.
Yeah, no, I got it, I figured, he said, he was, so you'll still have 12 inspectors, which is
Correct.
not enough, I truly realize that. Still have 3 clerks, and now you're gonna add an office manager.
Correct.
Okay, yeah, well, I'm fine. I'm good move.
Mr. Chair, one last comment. I think this is the first example you're going to see proposals before you of changes that are forthcoming, perhaps, in building standards under Carmen's leadership. He's learning, he has some ideas, and I do anticipate coming before you again with some proposals to make the place more efficient and effective in our operations, and this is the first of them.
Good. Go ahead.
Yeah, I just want to comment, for those who don't know, George and I actually started on the same day, back in 1972. So he's one of the longest tenured employees for the city of Allentown. And I commend you for you're saving $10,000, and I'm glad to hear, Mr. Doherty, that this is something we'll be looking at, across the spectrum, because I think it's important. We need to look at ways to save money, and yet somebody with your expertise certainly is going to be able to do the job. Obviously, you have more responsibilities, but knowing how you have worked in the past and your tenure here, you were well suited for it, and I commend you for that.
He looks a lot younger. Must be a mustache.
I was waiting for something.
Yeah, I didn't even say that. He always seems me, I got him tonight.
But anyway, thank you. I do want to express my congratulations to both of you.
Thank you.
I know that Dave Paulus was doing a wonderful job, and very, very nice man. And I call him all the time, so I'm going to need your cell phone numbers, okay? Because I used to call David all the time when he was here. I call Vicky too, and she'll get her chance in a second. But I just want to wish you the best, and we're here to help you as well. Okay, thank you. So thank you. Anybody from the public?
Ken Ebentrager, obviously, these two guys are great. We've worked with them before, fantastic positions to choose. We're always talking about saving money though, and you heard what he said though. They're overwhelmed. And I'll tell you what, I'm actually shocked at how quick they respond to some of the things that we put out there towards them. I mean, unsecured property, bang, 2 hours later, it's already nailed up. Now, I don't know, the $10,000 we saved, maybe we can throw it to the side and hold it there until we save some more money to get another inspector and another one, because these guys do a fantastic job. And imagine how much better the city would be if they had some more help back, honestly. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Ebentrager. I'm always, it warms my heart when I hear the public saying good things about the employees and about the good work that we do, because sometimes we just hear the opposite from people, And you know how it is. You're out there in the trenches with it. But thank you very much for the work you're doing. And I think satisfied with this. Anybody else from the dais? I'd like to get a motion to move this forward.
I'll make a motion that we move this forward to the full council with a favorable recommendation.
I'll second it. All in favor, please, by saying aye.
Aye.
All right, so we move this forward for the next council meeting. Thank you, gentlemen.
George?
Thank you.
Then we're going to move forward now to the presentation by, where's my agenda? It's not this. The presentation by the administration, and I think we have Ms. Vicky will do a great job as she always does. So, whenever you're ready, sir. And again, let me just preface by saying this will be, I know that it's not a lot of people here from the public, but we'd like to have, and we invited a lot of people from the administration because people were requesting it at the last council meeting, and they wanted to find out what was going on with this news in the, in the local media, and people writing on Facebook and saying all kinds of things that perhaps we wanted to have an explanation to from the city. So we convened this meeting so we can get those explanations and get the right information from the people who are working on a daily basis and who understand this health issue. So I'll pass it over to the administration, Mr. Daugherty.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I first wish to thank City Council collectively and Mr. Chairman, you individually for organizing this information session. We have assembled here a group of credentialed individuals to speak to various aspects of lead issues. Besides the health department, we have representatives from water compliance, building standards, and our federal programs coordinator. Mr. Chair, there's been much discussion of lead and lead issues, probably born of the terrible tragedy happening in Flint, Michigan. The purpose of this meeting tonight is to educate and inform our governing body as well as our public, general public, on all the various aspects of both internal and external that collectively we deal with here in Allentown with lead. I'm sure you'll be surprised to hear of some of those initiatives and programmatic actions that have been taken over the years. Our goal tonight will be to clarify and explain the science of lead poisoning in our bloodstreams and what we know of its scale and scope among our own citizens. A discussion of the programmatic initiatives that have been taken at various levels of government to help us do more in our community for lead and lead testing. And then finally, Mr. President, I probably would be remiss if I didn't take this opportunity to discuss the noise surrounding the white paper that was issued a week or so ago to City Council. To begin, the white paper was only meant as a primer for this discussion tonight so that members of the general public and City Council have a, well, perhaps a more rudimentary understanding of the issues of surrounding lead. The white paper represents a compilation of information from various departments, both internal and external to Allentown. And there's not one exclusive author, as is typical of white papers that I produce for you, such as the one I did on the snow equipment last week. But if it is important to state for the record an author, that is mine alone. With that, Mr. Chair, I will hand over to Ms. Kistler. She will begin with introductions of the panel here tonight, a brief presentation, and then ample time for questions from the dais and from the public. And with that, I will ask Ms. Kistler to take over.
Thank you, Fran. What I thought I would do is just give you a brief overview of a very complicated topic. Okay, and I need you to flag me if I lose anyone along the way, because there's a lot of terminology here that may be difficult to put into perspective. I then will have Angela, who's with us from Water Compliance, speak about a few bullets that we have about our water and the water testing that is done. And then we'll open it up to questions, and I brought with me staff that have worked in this program even longer than I'm with the city, and I'm here going on 23 years. And I brought actually the line staff with me who go into the homes and do the work that we're doing, so that if you do have questions, we can get those answers directly from the people who are working in the program. So to start, I want to make sure that people understand that lead is a heavy metal, and that a common misconception is that the only risk to a child is in peeling paint, because that is not the only risk to a child. Yes, peeling paint can be consumed by a child. Lead does taste sweet, and when they do consume a paint chip over time, it can lead to lead exposure. However, lead paint can slowly wear off over time as doors and windows get opened, and it creates a dust. It is the dust that we believe most often is the precipitating factor for an elevated lead level. So what happens is the dust falls to the ground. It falls on the floors, the objects, the clothing, the toys that a child, specifically a very young child, typically gets on their hands, and they put their hands in their mouths and their toys in their mouths because they're low to the ground and they're crawling in very many situations, and that's how they consume the lead dust. It is not an isolated event. It has to be consumed over a period of time in order for that blood level to become elevated. Now, elevated blood levels of 10 micrograms per deciliter, and we need to be clear that it's a microgram, which is much different than any other determination that people have been throwing around right now. It's a microgram per deciliter. 10 and above are reported under state law to the health departments for investigation. And those reports come to us from laboratories and from physician offices directly. If a child lives in the city and we get a report of a level of 10 or above, we do an intervention. We do a interview with that parent in the home. We explain the risks of lead, and we explain what you do to attempt to reduce a child's lead level. Anything below a 10 is usually obtained through a capillary or a finger stick that can be from 0 up until 10, or 1 venous blood draw. Now, I'm differentiating between the two because when we talk about the report that was released, there's a combination of finger sticks and of venous blood draws. A finger stick is a screening tool, and oftentimes there can be contaminants to a finger stick. So a finger stick needs to be confirmed by a blood draw, and a 0 to a 10 is reported by the Pennsylvania State Department of Health in aggregate data, like the chart that you saw. It is not called into the health department, and it does not trigger a public health intervention. It triggers a discussion between who ordered the test, the pediatrician, and the parent. And in a case of 0 to 10, the pediatrician advises the parent on how to reduce those lead levels. And that is through diet for the child, because food that is rich in iron and calcium, the lead binds to that, and it helps you to excrete the lead. It also involves cleaning, getting rid of the dust, getting the child away from the source of the issue. So frequent wet mopping, frequent wiping off your windowsills, painting over with non-lead-based paint, over old lead paint, those types of steps. And then a child who's a 0 to a 10, the pediatrician repeats those lead levels. And if those lead levels go up and they go over a 10, we become involved. If they go down and they go all the way down to a 0, obviously, they would stop the screening or assume that the child has gotten old enough to stop those behaviors or whatever. So with the health department, I don't know where the misconception came that we do nothing for lead. We are not a screening. We don't do lead screens ourselves. We don't draw the blood, but we still follow up on every single 10 or above in the city. The chart that was produced that created a lot of the stir that has Allentown at the top of that bar graph is in fact of concern, because it's showing that low levels in aggregate data are being reported. It's not surprising that we have lead poisoning. We've had lead issues for 30 plus, 40, 50 years. And we know that. We know that the majority of our housing stock that is built very early on contains lead-based paint, deep in the layers of its paint. I mean, we all kind of grew up in homes, at least I know I did, that was built prior to the elimination of lead paint and the regulations that took lead out of those environmental sources. So we know we have lead out there. It comes down to protecting the children from it. A particular concern to me as a health director is the low number of children that are being screened. There were 2,000, roughly 2,500 children under the age of 7 in those charts that received that screening in the city. So that is a call to action for us to remind and to enforce and to keep going at pediatricians and at the testing community to remind them that we need to keep screening these kids because they are in fact living in potential sources of lead. The other issue that we have before us is the fact that right now, if you are a child that receives medical assistance, you're a Medicaid child, that lead test is grouped along with other tests as part of a screening package. So what happens is that lead test is automatically triggered in the care for that child. So one of the issues that we have with the data that was presented is there's not enough information in there to give us a good solid story about who those children are who have a lead level of between 5 and 9. In other words, are they all from one geographic area? Are they all medical assistants and it's the pediatricians are only screening who's in the packet? We don't know anything about those kids other than an aggregate data number that took us to the top of that chart. What I do know is that there's some good, solid information also buried in that data and also buried in the data that we have. And Mike, if you can put up the chart that I sent to you. What we did is we took the levels of 10 and above and we added it to the chart that was produced by the Pennsylvania State Department of Health. I'm going to ask Mike to put that up there so that you can see the difference. I'm not saying that those 5 to 9s don't matter. They matter. Any child with any level of lead matters. But the numbers of children with extremely high elevated lead levels show a little bit of a different picture. So what the data is implying to me, once we look and dig deeper, and I have a conference call coming up with the Secretary of Health for the state of Pennsylvania on March 3rd, that all the county municipal health directors have asked for lead to be added to that agenda, because I'd like more information about the data they do have. How many are erroneous finger sticks? How many are validated blood draws? Where are these kids coming from? Because this is the chart, okay, that led to the bar graph. And as you see across the top, a VLL is a blood lead level of greater than or equal to 5. That means there were 574 of them in aggregate data. Some are valid, some are confirmed tests, some are not. But only 2,484 out of 12,000 kids under 7 in Allentown were screened at all. So the 23.11% of the kids with a greater than or equal to 5 represents 23.11% of the 2,484. But if we take it a step further to how many of those kids have a level of greater than or equal to 10, where public health action kicks in and where we have a comprehensive follow-up, we're at 1.73%. So that means that yes, our kids have some low-level exposure to lead, but thank heavens, our number of kids in that population greater than or equal to 10 is very low. Now, if Mike shows you the bar graph, had the bar graph come out about the 10s, it would look very different than the red chart you're looking at. Allentown is very close to the bottom of that chart. So what it's telling me is our kids with this lower level of exposure, we need far more parental education about the diet and the cleaning and the work that needs to be done in these homes to protect the kids. But that, thank heavens, the number of those kids in that 2,484 that had high enough lead levels for it to trigger the CDC recommended intervention of public health is a much lower percentage. Now, again, I'm stressing that lead is an issue. We have a lot of work to do, and I've set up meetings with community groups. This has been a good thing because we try to get these public health messages out to the community, and it's very, very difficult. So this is giving us a forum to get to pediatricians and remind them, to get to citizens and tell them how we can, through relatively simple means of changing diet, cleaning the dust, dealing with the paint, and getting that under control, that we have some hope here that we can keep those levels at 10 and above down. And that working in partnership, the pediatricians, the public health system, and the citizens, that we are doing okay when it comes to the fact that we do not have a widespread, wildly high elevated level. Among the only 2,400 kids that were screened, we don't know what the story is with the other 10,000 that haven't been. So we need more screening. And we're going to do our best to continue. We do it now, but we're going to continue with a concentrated effort to encourage those pediatricians to test. Now, a lot of questions came up about our water source. So I'd like to give Angela the opportunity. She can tell you a little bit about who she is and what she does, and then tell you her thoughts on our water.
Hello, my name is Angela DeBuo. I am currently a compliance auditor within the City of Allentown's Public Works Department. In my former role here with the city, I was the laboratories manager of both the water filtration plant and the wastewater plant. So I can provide some background on the city's compliance history and current compliance status with the lead and copper rule for drinking water. And if you could just bear with me, I'm going to read through my points and take your questions at the appropriate time. The EPA promulgated its lead and copper rule in 1991, and it requires that the public water suppliers monitor lead concentrations in drinking water from customer taps. Lead and copper concentrations must not exceed their respective action levels in at least 90% of the homes that are tested. If an action level is exceeded, the water system must undertake a number of corrective actions to include corrosion control treatment, increased monitoring, implementation of a lead service line replacement program, and notification of the residents. And even if an action level has not been exceeded, a system must provide the individual lead sample results to the participating homeowners, and also on an annual basis, those testing results are provided in the annual consumer confidence report. So the city's compliance history is as follows. In 1992, we began our initial monitoring for lead and copper with testing in the distribution system and at the plant entry points as well. 200 samples were collected from household taps at this time. A corrosion control study was completed and monitoring continued throughout the years. And after nearly a decade of obtaining results that were under the regulated action levels, the city attained and maintains reduced monitoring status. Subsequent sampling rounds were completed in 2004, 2007, 2010, and 2013, and the next monitoring round is due between June and September of this year. The samples are collected by the homeowners and are analyzed by an accredited laboratory. And the purpose of the monitoring is to ensure that a water supplier is not providing or creating corrosive water, which causes lead to leach from pipes, solder, and from the plumbing fixtures. So the point isn't to test individual homes, it's to create a representative sample pool and make sure that we're not exceeding action levels due to a corrosive environment created by the water supply. PADEP had reviewed the city's data and designated optimal ranges for certain water quality parameters, including these limits in the city's public water supply permit. So the water quality parameters are pH and alkalinity, and these are frequently monitored at both the plant and throughout the distribution system. And in order to ensure that our permit requirements are met, pH is continuously metered at the water filtration plant. And water filtration plant personnel conduct testing as well. Both pH and alkalinity monitoring occur in the distribution system on a bi-weekly basis. And this testing is reported to the PADEP on a monthly basis. If any excursions occur, the DEP is notified within 1 hour. The alkalinities are high throughout our distribution system because our source water is high in mineral content, and this is actually a good thing for Allentown because the high mineral content creates a scale which protects the pipes from corrosion. So in conclusion, since testing began in 1992, the results of Allentown's lead and copper monitoring have never exceeded an action level. The city has never been required to add a corrosion inhibitor chemical to our drinking water, and if an action level is ever exceeded, the plant is equipped to respond. So that's all I have, and if you have any questions, I'll take them at the appropriate time.
Thank you.
We felt it was very important to stress the fact that we honestly believe elevated blood lead levels that are being found in our kids are coming from the consumption of the dust. Not that we have a whole generation of kids that are chipping paint Not that we have, and true, we could have pipes that are older that could leach lead, but we do not have a water source contamination as we were compared to cities that do. And I think Angela does an excellent job of kind of putting that into layman's terms, because it's a very complicated process. But I think in a nutshell, there are warning triggers that would indicate to the water staff on a daily basis whether we have contamination.
Do you have anybody else that you want to?
The only thing that we did not describe that I'd like Jeff to take a brief moment and describe is the environmental response that happens when a child's lead level is a 20 or higher, or we have two consistent 15s within a 3-month period. If any child is consistently testing at a 15 and those levels aren't going down, or a child reaches a 20, it triggers an environmental response by the health department. And Jeff in a nut is going to try to summarize the whole process in a very short summary of what we do environmentally if we have that.
Okay. Good evening. As you heard Vicki say earlier, we have reported to us here in the health department all those cases where the child's blood level exceeds 10 micrograms per deciliter.
Hold on one second. We have 19 of those in 2014 and 21 of those reports in 2015.
A relatively small number. When we received a report, however, of a child who has an elevation above 20, or as she just said, 2 consecutive results that exceed 15, it triggers an environmental investigation. Now, I say it triggers an environmental investigation because that is in accordance with the CDC guidelines for medical intervention in such cases. We have a staff of sanitarians who have all been certified as risk assessors and lead inspectors. One of them is assigned that child's case along with a community health specialist. They go out and meet with the family and complete a rather lengthy risk assessment of that child, trying to identify things that may be present in that child's environment that could be the source of lead, and also asking questions, for instance, about the parent's employment, about hobbies that they may conduct in the house, and other things of that nature, to try and get a broad picture of what the potential lead sources may be that this child is being exposed to that has led to their elevation. Once that risk assessment has been conducted, and I can just say anecdotally, over my 30 years in working in this program, we have had very, very few cases that involved a lead source other than lead paint. So it is, as Vicki said, it's usually the lead dust that's been created by lead paint. In any event, once that determination has been made, our sanitarian will go back to the house with a portable X-ray fluorescence device, an XRF. This device is capable of providing an immediate readout and reading through as many layers of paint as there may be on a particular surface. This device is capable of telling us whether or not there is lead content in that paint. Under the city's ordinance that was passed in 1994, when we identify lead-painted surfaces, the property owner receives a notice of violation telling them that they are responsible for making that property now lead safe. And we will follow that case until that unit has been rendered lead safe. It's an extraordinarily difficult process. It's an extraordinarily expensive process. In the last 10 years, we have seen approximately 85 cases abated here in the city. We have had, in the past, grant opportunities that will assist property owners in making those corrections or doing those projects which need to be done by a certified lead remediation firm. And I can only tell you that when we had some HUD monies available to us in the last decade, the average cost per unit was exceeded $17,000 per unit. So it's an extremely expensive proposition for these property owners to have to deal with. There is not always grant funding available for them. Right now, the city only has, I believe, $135,000 available this year for lead remediation. But much of the work that is done comes unfortunately as a result of a child who is found to have an elevation. They are essentially the canary. And it's an unfortunate circumstance that that has to take place. But when you consider that the city of Allentown has 46,000 or so dwelling units, and nearly 44,000 of them were constructed prior to 1980, and lead paint wasn't banned until 1978. It's a pretty good bet that almost every child in Allentown lives in a house that has some degree of lead paint in it. So it's primary prevention, getting rid of all the lead paint in all of the dwelling units in Allentown. There's not enough money in the world to do that. And this is not a problem that is restricted to Allentown. This is throughout the country and around the world. But in any event, that's a brief overview of our response to the environmental issues that we often find.
Thank you all. Great presentation. I have a couple of questions, but I'd like to give the opportunity to my colleagues first, actually all of you, because this is publicly, to ask any questions that you want. Go right ahead, please.
Thank you. And I guess this is directed toward you, Ms. Kistler. How does lead education happen in our children who do not speak English?
Our Judy Vega is with us tonight. Judy, you want to put your hand up? Judy is bilingual, and Judy speaks Spanish and English, and she delivers that education directly to the families in either of those two languages. If a family does not speak either of those two languages, we use a language line for interpretation. It isn't ideal, but it can interpret up to 32 different languages that we interpret the information for them to make sure that they understand, and or we can bring a native language speaker with us if we can find one that speaks the dialect that the family speaks. All of our printed information from the CDC, that's the source we use, or the Centers for Disease Control, comes in a variety of languages, and we make sure that anything we distribute is in a language that the family can read if they're able to read.
Okay, thank you. And I imagine our intervention is not something that happens immediately and ends. It's something that takes time and it happens over time, correct?
Correct. And Judy has long-term relationships with these families because these kids continue to be monitored until their blood lead levels indicate there's no longer a need to. So she has long-standing relationships with these families, and she's done this work for how many years, Judy? 20 years.
Okay, thank you. One other question. How long has the health department been working on the lead issue?
The health department started in 1980 and had a lead program from its inception.
Okay, thank you.
Now, lead levels have changed. Reportable lead levels have changed considerably. Years ago, lead wasn't reportable until, I can't speak to exact levels, but I can tell you that it has dropped from 20, it has dropped to 15, it has dropped to 10, and part of the chaos we have is the recent CDC recommendation that no level is acceptable. So reportable levels have changed considerably over time.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, I have a couple of very good presentation. Are there, Jeff, you talked about there's a device to check the levels of lead
Yes.
in paint? Okay.
Yes, it's an XR, its acronym is XRF, it's an X-ray fluorescence device.
Okay, we just passed Bill 3, okay? We said amending the property rehabilitation and maintenance code, okay? By adding, and Carmen said by adding for multi-units, the whole bit of carbon monoxide detectors. Would it be feasible to put something in that Bill 3 that when they do those upgrades and inspections, that's what we're calling them, basically, that the homes also be tested for that device? I mean, am I off the wall?
Well, the device itself
Go ahead.
costs about $20,000. So I'm not sure.
It's not just a little pocket thing where you go around the house and
No,
just like
no,
that.
this is a very sophisticated device that the operator needs to be certified in its use.
Okay, okay.
Now, there are commercial products, people can go to Home Depot and buy lead wipes.
Right.
And they can they can send it to a lab and they can pay the fee to have it tested. The issue with some of the testing though is, again, we need to be careful. You're gonna find it, and when you find it, you're gonna be under the lead ordinance to abate it, and it's going to be incredibly expensive.
Okay, so, given that, what age should a child be tested?
The recommendations are for children to be tested at the age of 1, the age of 2, and again, under the age of, one more time, before they reach the age of 7, only if they are questionnaire screened and determined to have a risk. So children who reside in lead-safe properties don't typically have lead exposure. And again, lead-safe properties are new construction where lead-based paint was never used, or properties that have already been remediated or abated. However, certain states have universal testing laws where they test every child regardless. We are not. Pennsylvania is not a universal testing state.
Give me the closest state that is.
I can get that information for you, but I don't know off the top of my head.
I
I
believe
believe Ohio, but I don't know either. I think Ohio is our closest universal testing state.
Okay, approximate age, I mean, two questions, two points in one. Are there pockets in the city where you see a more higher concentration of children with
That's a
lead?
very, very good question.
What-
And that's something that I'm trying to explore with the Pennsylvania State Department of Health. Since they're the testers, they hold the data, which is why somebody can throw out saying, let's do a white paper, but we can't do a white paper on someone else's data that we don't truly have the answers to. So they've released this chart from the state of Pennsylvania saying that 545 of our kids have this elevated blood lead level. And they clustered it on a tiny little map that really doesn't define a whole lot for us. What I don't know is, what about all the kids that weren't tested? I can tell you that of the 19 children that we had with elevated blood lead levels above the 19 kids that were above a 10 in 2014, they represented 7 census tracts. So I don't believe
Say that again,
7 census tracts. These 19 kids that Judy followed in 2014 came from 7 different census tracts. So that leads me to believe that kids can be lead poisoned in any property anywhere that contains lead. But the CDC's documentation show that typically there are groups at higher risk, and that typically lower income kids tend to live in more substandard housing. So the CDC issues income level or poverty level as a risk factor. We don't really have a good representative sample. You can live in a beautiful old historic home with lead and you can still have a lead poisoned child. So one of the things we don't have is a good sample of the kids in Allentown. There's 12,000 kids under the age of 7. We've only tested 2,400 of them, and most of those tests, judging by the results, came from Center City. So again, part of what we need to do in public health is encourage these pediatricians to broaden their testing base and test more than just the medical assistance kids that automatically get triggered in this package of testing, and make sure that we get a better representative sample.
I mean, it's really lead poisoning, right?
Elevated blood lead levels,
Lead
yes.
poisoning. What are symptoms?
Well, that's interesting. At very low levels, the symptoms may be very hard to recognize. When serious lead poisoning occurs, then you can see developmental and behavioral changes. You can also see patterns of behavior. Many kids crave lead because lead tastes sweet. So you can see some unusual behaviors once you see a child that has significant poisoning. But at very, very low levels of exposure, you've heard them say in the media, and you've heard the connections being made to lower points of an IQ test. Very few of our kids are IQ tested. So some of the connections that have been made have been to developmental delays, to behavior disorders, to attention deficit disorders, to those kind of things. But those are from prolonged levels of elevated blood lead levels. So it's hard to differentiate whether a child has a behavior problem or a attention deficit problem just solely based on lead or on other factors.
You talked earlier about diet. How does diet play a role?
Food's high in iron, food's high in calcium. The lead actually binds to that food, and as you excrete, you're able to excrete some of the lead. As opposed to a diet of a fatty consumption food makes it harder to excrete the lead. Now, it's hard to get a kid to eat a diet rich in iron. I mean, let's face it, we're talking liver, and we're talking spinach, and we're talking, green leafy vegetables, and beans, and, things that a lot of kids aren't eating. But if parents make a concentrated effort with these children to change their diet to some of the better foods for them, they can lower their blood lead levels by dietary controls.
All right, thank you. I'm okay for now.
Thanks.
Appreciate that.
Thank you.
I'd like to address the rehab of the homes. Are there special contractors that have to be in there? Like a developer comes in, buys 2 or 3 row homes, and they want to gut it, because I understand once you disturb it, it's airborne, it's there. What about your neighbors? It's in the spring, windows are open. Is it going to affect your neighbors? Do you have special contractors that do this work? And how do you contain the dust that's in the air for the neighborhood?
Yes, the contractors that do lead work have to be certified to do that work. And one of the primary things that they have to employ during a lead abatement project is, in fact, making certain that the dust does not escape the property. And they are required to essentially wall off the property utilizing plastic. Taping it off and making certain that the dust does not escape. There are very stringent EPA regulations that are in play that they need to be compliant with while doing those projects. I want to differentiate, however, a lead abatement project from a remediation or a demolition project that is just being done at the whim of a contractor or a homeowner. If you are disturbing lead paint in your own home, or you intend to do that, or you're going to hire a painting contractor to come in and redo the banister in your house, that is not considered a lead abatement project. However, there is other federal legislation called the RRP rule, which is renovation, repair, and paint rule that comes into play. All of us that are doing such renovations in our homes or having a contractor come into our homes to do that, those contractors also had to be certified through the RRP rule to make certain that they did not unintentionally, they do not unintentionally create a lead hazard in your household. Now, the nature of the, I'm not sure the word I'm searching for here, the way that they screen off the work area is not as stringent as it may be for a lead abatement project, but they still need to take appropriate precautions to make sure that they are not going to create such an amount of lead dust that it creates a hazard for the occupants of the home.
Yeah,
And the larger, I should also add, the larger demolition projects that take place where entire buildings are being taken down by, the big wrecking balls and so forth. If you've ever taken a close look, you'll see that in almost every one of those instances, there are water misting hoses set up for the express purpose of keeping the dust down during the course of those demolitions. That is also required under federal law.
Thank you. You answered my question. The thing is, hypothetically, I buy a home and I decide to do this work on my own. Is there any authority that is out there building standards, or are they checking on that I'm doing it the proper way, that I'm not exposing this to my neighbors and so on and so forth? We don't have any.
Unless you were seeking a permit of some kind, because the work that you're doing is so extensive or require a permit, no, the city doesn't, the health department and building standards wouldn't be coming into your living room to actually check on the nature of the work that you
This
did.
is why a permit is so valuable.
Yes,
So-
I mean, obviously there are projects that you can do in your own home without a permit as well, and you can still
Well,
disturb.
yeah, I'm talking about gutting it and.
Oh, yeah, larger projects like that
With
that require a permit,
some of
absolutely,
the, okay.
absolutely,
Thank you.
yeah.
Brendan?
Thank you. If I'm not mistaken, in reading over the data that was presented, I understand we no longer have the availability of grants.
We no longer have a grant into the health department that pays for us to conduct our own testing. We no longer have a grant into the health department that pays for Judy's time or the other staff time who respond to lead. We have never stopped utilizing Judy in that capacity. We simply do it. We just don't do our own testing at this point. The Pennsylvania State Department of Health has shifted that funding to Pinnacle Health, who does this for a 7 or 8 county area, that we do get from Pinnacle $100 for every environmental inspection we do, up to 15 in a year. So we do get that. What is also confusing is that some of the grants that come into the city aren't grants to us to do this work. They're grants to the property owner to be able to help with abatement. Those grants have steadily declined. There is money available, as they said, through CDBG, that the city has made the decision to put forth toward this. But the number of state and federal grants coming to us is of concern, and that is one of the topics that the health directors are going to be addressing with the Pennsylvania State Department of Health. That although they are producing the data indicating that there are serious issues with lead, they are also shifting the funding away from lead to other public health issues. So we're entertaining the discussions with them about the disconnect there that does result in a lack of services.
Okay, and that was my other question, that it appears that the data shows the number of kids with the elevated levels is going down.
The number of kids with the elevated levels is going down nationwide, but again, I caution the way we're interpreting the data. The levels will go down if you test fewer kids. So what is of concern is the low number of kids being screened to begin with. We don't know what the levels will do if we screen more. The levels may continue to go down if we screen more, because maybe we really do have pockets of lead-exposed kids. But the numbers could also go way up if we find that we're wrong and that there are, more kids in more places than what we suspect. So the real answer to the question is, we truly only know the story on the 2,484 kids that were screened. We don't know the story on the rest of them.
I have one more question, and that would probably basically somewhat silly. Do you always find the source of lead?
No.
When you have kids?
No, we usually can get close, but no. And one of the reasons that I say that is because we have a percentage of our community who is also transient. So if that child has recently moved here from an area where they were lead exposed, but are now living in a lead safe environment, and we go into test and the environment is now lead safe, it's still going to take some time for the lead to work its way out of that child's system. So we don't always find the source for the child.
Where in fact it could have been infected somewhere else.
They could have been infected somewhere else, or they may spend the majority of their time somewhere else. In Grammy's house in another community, or I spent the summer with an aunt and an uncle that don't live around here. We can only test those homes that we come in contact here in Allentown. We make referrals certainly for the previous home to be tested, but we have no way of knowing whether that municipality even has a lead program. One of the things that I feel I need to point out is that we are one of few health departments still working in lead, and we are one of few health departments that still have this kind of a comprehensive approach to the 10s and above, because many of those health departments lost their funding and their cities did not support the continuation of the work. So then it falls solely to the pediatricians in those communities.
Thank you.
I have a couple.
Thank you.
Oh,
Go ahead.
It generated one question. The 2,400 kids that were tested, and you might not be able to answer this, even with the information from the state, is what generated them being tested?
Well, I don't know. I can speculate that a percentage of them, and I'm willing to speculate a significant percentage, got that test by default because it's part of that what they call the EPSDT package for Medicaid recipients. So when you're a pediatrician and you see a child at age 1 or 2, if they're Medicaid and it triggered the package, the test got triggered. Another part of the percentage are probably kids who the pediatrician did the verbal screening tool and it indicated a suspicion of lead, or an educated consumer asked them to screen their kid for lead and a test was pulled. But that's all my speculation into the 2,484 tests that PADOH has in their possession. Now, they get these tests reported to them from the laboratories that run them. So I don't know how much information I'm going to be able to get from them either. I also know that right now, all of PADOH's data has been coming out by zip code. And another issue with our data is that the 18103 and the 18104 zip codes are shared between Salisbury and Allentown and between South Whitehall and Allentown. So I'm not even sure that the whole 500 and some tests that are included in there are all technically Allentown. I suspect they are, but I don't know that for sure. So these are some of the questions that I'm posing to them, and one of the reasons why I can't give you scientific information on exactly the extent of this situation in our city, because the data isn't there to support whether or not we even really have a representative sample of our kids.
Thank you.
Thanks, a couple more. You said earlier about the pediatricians. You wish more of the pediatricians would test for the lead.
Well, I'm certainly thinking this will be a loud sounding horn. And one of the things that we have through our infection control relationships, through our medical advisors, through the physicians that we network with, is the ability to reach out to them with a message. So one of the first things that we've done is reach out to say, we need a broader based screening. I think this 5 to 9, this change to showing the 5 to 9 lead levels that has just occurred through the CDC over the last year to 2 years is an eye-opener. And I want to make sure that each of those physicians truly understands. One of our Board of Health members, Dr. Morphy, is very active in the medical society. He is also a pediatrician with privileges at multiple hospitals. He's certainly going to put this out for us. We're going to get the message out to pediatricians that we'd like to see more screening done on our city kids.
And you said earlier, Pennsylvania does not mandate the
No,
screening.
there's no mandate.
Can a municipality mandate the screening
We would have-
via an ordinance or a bill?
We would have no way of doing that. It would be a requirement for medical practice and medical management. So what the medical profession goes by are CDC recommendations and state law, essentially. We can certainly make a recommendation, and when we have Secretary Murphy on the phone in a week, we're certainly going to ask her to reach out to all the pediatricians in the state and encourage testing. Whether or not Pennsylvania state law goes to mandatory testing, that's going to be their call on the political level, but we're certainly going to advocate that it does. And we have been for years advocating that.
And my questions in no way reflect, questioning what you're doing. 'Cause
Oh, no,
if
not
you're
at all.
doing-
I think they're
don't-
great
don't-
questions.
Don't take it that way, because you're doing a wonderful job, and our health bureau is to be commended of what they do for the children of Allentown. You talked about symptoms.
Mm-hmm.
How do you treat it? You got a cold, you go to the doctor, he gives you amoxicillin or something. How do you treat?
That's part of the problem. Until a child reaches a lead level that is above a 45, and even at 45, physicians are hesitant. So sometimes they'll wait until a 60 in order to administer a chelation therapy. And chelation therapy is very difficult on the child, and it actually draws the lead out of their system. It's not a pain-free process. It's not easy on parents. It's not easy on the child. It's almost the treatment of last resort when a child's level just can't be brought down. The real treatment is to stop the ingestion of the lead. Mm-hmm. And that is through the environmental controls. That is through the frequent hand washing of the child, the frequent removal of the dust, the frequent washing of the toys. the painting over the paint, anything you can do to reduce that. But the good news is that we've seen dramatic falls in children's blood lead levels when those environmental controls take place.
One other comment, I mean, we all care about the Allentown kids and all kids obviously all over. But it almost seems like our Allentown kids have two strikes against them from the get-go. And it's kind of sad, it saddens me, being what I did in my previous life. Poverty, diet, and transient. I mean, it's tough.
It's extremely tough, but I want to stress to you, and this is by no means a good thing, but lead exposure occurs everywhere that the housing stock is older. So as much as I do agree with you that our kids have a challenge and that they face multiple challenges every day, I also don't want to do what kind of is happening as a result of this media attention, and that is to say that this is an Allentown problem. This is a nationwide problem with an older housing stock. And I think that the more we stress the fact that this is affecting children everywhere, the higher the possibility is that we could get universal testing, or we could get more attention paid to the issue.
And just, I'll make this comment, and I mean, this was a hot topic, Mr. Docker, several weeks ago, and I'm very disappointed we don't have more parents. I mean, more community members here, but it is what it is, and that doesn't.
Hopefully they can stream it through the website.
Yeah, they
because there were a lot of people here complaining about that last.
You're doing it now with streaming?
Yeah. But there were a lot of people here last meeting asking and making comments, and that's why we convened this meeting, as I said earlier. And hopefully they will see it and get an abundance of information that you've given us today. I mean, I learned a lot. I mean, I knew some of this information before, but I don't think I could have said, how many microgram decimeter we had before on a child, and how many we needed to have in order for them to be treated.
And the good news is I do have 4 sessions booked with citizen groups coming up who have called in the last few days to say, could you come and explain this to us? We don't understand. So that is good, and it's been good that people are talking about it. We just want them to talk about it accurately.
And I just want to ask a couple of questions. Are you done, Mr.?
I have one more, sorry.
Later on, you have too many.
There's one last one.
Go right ahead.
Children congregate, it doesn't matter where they congregate, but daycare facilities, childcare facilities, that would be like what we would think. I mean, it's not transmitted, obviously, okay, but to get the word out to the childcare facilities and the communication plan, what we're talking about now, because we have tons of daycare facilities and childcare facilities.
Right, and this is a topic that is addressed during the course of our routine regulatory inspections of those facilities.
Those places, okay, good. Okay, that's good, thank you.
Okay, I'm going to start with just a few questions. Most of my questions actually were answered earlier from your presentation, and also from the questions of my colleagues here. But I just had a couple of other ones that I'd like you to probably give me some information about. And in the process, I'm going to talk a little bit about the process of inspection. In the housing authority, Allentown Housing Authority, for example, one of the things that they do is they also look at peeling paint when they do the inspections of the properties. And I'm not sure if through the process of rental inspections, do we look at that and require that they paint a certain area that may be peeling in the property? Comment may be the one talking about that. Because it may be something that we can either mandate ourselves as a simple mandate through the process, and also kind of like coordinate with the Allentown Housing Authority's inspectors, because they inspect every year anyway. So just a suggestion, if you're not doing it, for you to start doing that, because I think Vicky is right that it's going to be almost impossible to remediate every single old home that we have in Allentown.
Could we address paint?
Go right ahead.
Because we address the paint in our code.
You do address it?
Yeah, we address the paint in our code anyhow, because any paint, walls, holes, we address that in our code anyhow.
Okay, so, and that would be do you do it during the rental inspection, or do you also do it during the time, like when there's a sale or a home, that you have to do an inspection?
Both.
Both, okay. So they have to paint the area?
Yes.
Okay, not necessarily the whole house, obviously, because if the house is painted, has not been painted since 1980, we probably gonna have lead painting in that house, lead paint poison in that house, right?
You're gonna bring it up. So it's gonna be smooth, clean, so.
Yeah, no remediation or abatement anyway, so that's the main issue. The other question that I had, let's see, a couple of them. I was writing so many things as we were talking, but I think the myth that the lead paint, and Angela, you did a great presentation, the myth that the lead paint is in the water, and hopefully it's diffused at this point. I think the other thing that I wanted to highlight is in regards to the PADOH, if there is a way to work with them so they can combine, or at least look at us in, our chart look like higher than everybody else, and get them to give us some information and do some intervention in addition to what we already do.
That's exactly what we're hoping to discuss in this conference call with the Secretary of Health. That all of the health departments in Pennsylvania, there are 10 county municipal health departments in Pennsylvania, they're all concerned about this issue. Like every one of them got calls when this media thing hit the fan. And every one of them is concerned that the direction that the state has been moving in terms of their funding has been further and further away from local public health. Yet the reports of the elevated lead levels come to local public health. So I think that they heard loud and clear that their data created some stir. However, I also think that they're to be commended because they have data. Whereas the reporters in the Vox article stated, they couldn't find lead data for very many states anywhere. So when they Googled lead data by state, Pennsylvania popped up and they hit their chart and they went wild with the chart, and it went a little off the rank here. But we have some data, so we have a place to start. And we're going to work with them as a partner, and we're going to hope that we're going to change their minds about the future direction of some of their funding, to hope that maybe we can do some pilot work here and see what we're up against.
And the last thing, I got all the questions, but I know the public wants to talk, and I know Mr. Evans is anxious to come over and talk. But just one last thing in regards to the amount of money that we have in our budget for lead paint remediation. $135,000 almost insignificant to what we really need. And we need to look at that, and I'm talking more to my colleagues about it as we look at the budget next time, and also to you as manager, and make that recommendation. When you do your budget, and see how we can probably increase that amount by some.
Well, and the one thing that we have to remember, as I'm sure Heidi has well educated all of you on, is that CDBG has requirements. So the funding that we have right now is helpful to people who meet those requirements. But to people who earn above the CDBG recommended earning levels or eligible earning levels, this is a financial hardship on a family. And if they earn $1,000 too much and they can't access that money, but they have a $17,000, $25,000 abatement bill, this is a significant hardship on a household.
When you're talking about $17,000 to abate, the lead paint in the house is almost impossible for most of the people who live in the city.
Well, and think about it, if it's in your windows, think about how expensive it is to replace windows. And this is not something that's easy to just say we have a fix to. And it's tough, and that's why we're so, we deliver cleaning supplies. Judy delivers the actual cleaning supplies to the families to say, let's clean, and let's see how much and how often we can clean, and let's wash that kid's hands, and let's try to get that kid to eat healthy, so we can see if we can get those levels down, so that we're not looking at, massive bills and massive upheavals. And some residence owners who rent their homes or who rent their apartments, they may not be able to do this renovation, and then they let their building go vacant, and we end up having displaced families. So
right.
we don't want to create more issues than we have.
That's an excellent point, because you're right. They'd rather let it go and vacate it and you know, and have a dilapidated,
Some
home out
homes
there.
aren't worth what it takes to abate them.
Correct. But, let me just, ask the public, because I know some of you may want to, speak, and I may come back later to actually, clarify at least. Mr. Heffentrey, you've been standing for a while, I know you're getting impatient, but thank you for waiting. Thank you for waiting.
Actually, took another meeting a while ago.
Oh, okay.
I'm Traeger, 733 North London Street, represent the Allentown Tenant Association. A couple of things, in the Vox report though, and then fantastic, everybody there was fantastic. I learned a lot also, but keep in mind also, everybody's blasting the Vox report. It never talked about water, but the reason they went with the story was because of the Flint lead issue. You know, and it did not just single out Allentown, so it happens we were the worst on the list, but it singled out Pennsylvania. So it really seems to me that maybe this diocese here needs to start going up the scale. It seems that Pennsylvania's the one dropping the ball big time. I mean, seriously. But a couple questions quick was that machine that you had mentioned that cost $20,000 and somebody has to be specifically trained on it. How long a period of time does he need in the home?
It depends entirely on the size of the home. I would say an average inspection in a typical Allentown apartment, 2-bedroom apartment, probably takes anywhere from 3 to 4 hours.
All right. How about the consideration of a long-term, not total abatement, but something that would, you know, you said there was 3 separate ways that they can get an abatement. I forget what the other 2 were, but something that would get remediation, something like in the middle that would bring the cost down, somewhat help in the taking care of the process, but make it a long-term thing that if it's found, then it has to be taken care of. Because honestly, you know, I'm not a homeowner, so I not realized the cost to be $17,000 to $25,000. Exactly, it makes it impossible about a long-term effect that it has to be evaded. That they have a 10, 15-year period, because reality is, if we're not looking at all, it's gonna be all that time anyway, but stretching it out over that much time may help.
Well, in terms of, I want to clarify what I said. When we're talking about all the cases that we have dealt with over the course of the last few years, or going back as long as I can recall, we're not talking about total lead abatement. Total lead abatement is the removal of all of the lead that's within a particular property. That's not what we are doing here. What we are doing is attempting to have these contractors do the work, render the property lead safe. There is still lead in that property, okay? And if it is not maintained, if the painted surfaces are not maintained going forth in the future, after the project has been completed, the lead may resurface as a problem if it's disturbed. But what we are trying to do during this process is, really they're considered interim controls. We're trying to address the portions of the property that present the greatest risk. The impact surfaces where a door shuts against a jamb. The friction surfaces where a sash goes up and down inside the window. Those are things that need to actually be replaced. But we are not looking at tearing out intact plaster or lath walls and replacing all of that wall. There's still going to be paint there. There's still going to be lead paint there. We're not even talking about sanding it down to the bare surface. But we are talking about painting over it and sealing it. So I want to draw the distinction here between a full abatement, which almost never takes place, and these interim controls that render the property as lead safe. And that's what we are looking for. And that's what costs $17,000 a unit.
Okay. When I see a home tag, when it's tagged the street from me, said lead on, which one are we going for in that building? Are we determining which one needs to be done?
Yes.
Or, okay, so that's fine. The one last thing, honestly, is it seems, because most of it comes from dust, that painting really does help a lot. I mean, to at least diminish the issue, which falls back to, again, the 5-year inspection cycle, that we are the only city that we can find anywhere with 5-year inspection cycle is an issue. Because how much of that paint is beaten up, and I'm telling you right now, I work for one of these gentlemen. They don't paint unless they absolutely have to at the 5 years, but in my apartment, I've seen 4 layers because we smashed the cabinet into the wall. It's more than 4 layers, it's like this thick. The point is, a 5-year cycle, they don't have to paint for 5 years. A lot of this could be happening towards the last couple of years of this, the dust particles and stuff like that. So again, a point system or a shorter cycle, I think really, again, shows it's needed. Like I said, look for it, but I can't find another city with 5-year inspection cycle. You're it. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. You're ready.
First off, I am very disappointed not to see parents here. I am a mother that raised a child with lead poisoning. My name was Renee Kohler at the time. I lived in Montgomery County in Willowbrook, Pennsylvania. I worked with the state legislators. My son's lead level was 48. Went up 2 days later to 50. He was exposed to lead dust. The health department in Montgomery County, I haven't dealt with Allentown yet, but I would love to work with them. They actually came out, and I formed a group, Mother Against Lead. And what happened was the health department came out with the machine and said we glowed at night. That's how much lead dust was in our home. We can live with lead. We can live with it. Children can live with it. But we as parents, we as health department, doctors, need to check children from the age of 1. My son was 18 months old when he was diagnosed with lead poisoning. I knew something was wrong with him. And finally, an old doctor said, let's check his lead. How old's your house? I said, well, the house is 1900. I'm a renter. There you go. Came back with lead poisoning. What we need to do is, we need to clean. We need to teach them, educate them. And obviously, I don't see many parents here in concern of this. But the health department is right. Education, cleaning, painting. They don't eat the paint. They just breathe it in. Fingers in their mouths. But it affects, when you ask the question about how you know the signs, there are signs. I saw the signs.
What were some of them for your child?
He couldn't sleep. He would bang his head. He would bite you and draw blood. Fine-tuned motor skill problems, speech problem. He's now 20 years old and he still has problems. Okay, it's not something that just goes away. He put my house on fire. Okay, at 3 years old, almost 4, because he was mad at me. There's a lot that goes on with lead, but we can live with it. People need to stop panicking. We can fix it. And a lot of it is educating, a lot of it's landlords. I'm a landlord. You can go to North 11th Street, 143, I'll gladly take you in. You will not find one piece of paint that's peeling. Everything is sealed. We prime, we seal. We do inspections on our tenants every 6 months to make sure the place is okay. I have no children in my unit cell, but I also give them a closure. The closure that says you have 10 days to check the place for lead. If you find there's lead and you don't want to live there, you can take and leave. That's in a lease. And landlords need to do that, and I don't think they are doing that. And Allentown needs to take care of that. Code enforcers need to make sure that tenants are aware of this. The health department, I can see, is doing an awesome job, and I'm very proud of this. But as a parent that went through it, I don't want people out there to say, oh my God, my child's a 10. You can get through it as long as you do the right things and you follow what they're telling you to do. I got through it, dropped my son lead, it took 2 years. He was on chelation. She said chelation, he did it. It wasn't dropping quick enough. And it wasn't, and it was horrible. But no parent should have to go through it. but we can prevent it. Doctors can prevent it, the city of Allentown, the health department needs funding to educate people. You can go to schools and educate them, but the parents have to be there too. So I just wanted you guys to know that I believe that my mother against lead, maybe I should start forming it up here, but they are doing the right thing. You can live with lead as long as you maintain it. And that's all I'm saying is I think they're actually right on stealing it. You know, not, you have to take the windows out, the wood out. Eventually you might have to. But for the time being, a lot of these homes are run down. Allentown has a lot of rundown homes.
Yeah, let's,
So basically all I'm saying is that is an issue, lead does affect. And a child at 10, I don't know what it does at 10. I can tell you what it does at 48, 50. I don't know at 10. Okay?
yeah, thank you for sharing
Thank
your
you.
information, appreciate it. Let me just give you a couple of pointers and then I know a couple of other, my fellow council members have other comments. And probably what we can do is, just to get something out of this meeting that may be helpful for residents, is to develop a sheet with about 5 or 6 points that we can distribute throughout the city, either rental, other inspections, or maybe when people buy a house, or probably we can just give them in City Hall, I mean, when they come over to the city, or send it with the water, I mean, well, not water bill anymore, what bill is that, tax bill or something, trash bill, whatever it may be.
We do have in the back of the room, Julio, the CDC fact sheets that bullet point exactly what a parent can do. The frequently asked questions are located in the back. We also have Heidi with us today who can tell you what we have done in some of these units that I think is rather impressive in the HUD work that she has done, the grants she's administered with regard to this. So I do think that she can shed some light on that as well.
And I'm gonna ask her to speak in a second, but one other thing is that, you know, and I'm guilty myself, I get tons of paperwork, so tons of letters, tons of junk mail. And you know what I do to junk mail usually? Throw it in the garbage, okay? Most people do that, period, okay? So what I'm suggesting is, looking at some of these points, environmental, cleaning, painting, diet, and probably some suggestion what you say, you know, liver, spinach, you know, whatever iron type of producing a diet. Testing, making sure that when they take the children to the pediatrician, that they request that themselves.
Okay.
Okay. Probably give them some of the signs that you were talking about, and you know, some of the signs that they can start noticing with their children. You know, they're biting, or they're, you know, drowsy, they're not sleeping, things like that. But do it in a specific way. Kind of have like almost like a what would I call it? Like an avalanche of this, you know, so they know and make it not just send it in the bills, but just make sure that we do some kind of informational exchange at some time. And talking about informational exchange, also do it with the school district, so they're getting that kind of information as well. They send paper to the house all the time, the ASD, and probably commingle with them in regards to doing that kind of proactive type of informational sharing. Do you mind if I know someone else?
One gentleman.
Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead. One, sorry. Because I want to ask Ms. Baird to speak for a little.
My name is Dr. Stephen Katz. I'm a pediatrician. I work at the Lehigh Valley Hospital Children's Clinic. I'm an associate professor of pediatrics at the University of South Florida. And I'm only attending as a member of the public, as a courtesy to act as a resource. I have no unique expertise in lead poisoning in pediatrics, although my experience with it goes back to 1976 with my residency training. And so as I was listening to the comments, I thought if there was anything that I could serve as a medical resource, it would be my pleasure.
Thank you. Thank you. Appreciate you being here.
Thank you.
Very helpful.
I appreciate that.
Somebody get his information before he leaves.
Thank you for coming. Let me just ask Heidi Baird to speak a little bit of what she has. She came up to speak, and then we'll come back to the questions, okay? All the comments.
I just wanted to mention, we talked a little bit about the funding we have in place now, approximately $135,000 in CDBG dollars. And you're right, that is not nearly enough to address the problem. However, that pot of money is specifically to help remediate properties when the Health Bureau has identified children with elevated blood lead levels. Through our years, I think it's since 2004, HUD has required that any rehab work that we do with federal dollars, extensive housing rehab work, has to be done with the result of the unit being declared lead safe. And there's different thresholds of up to $5,000 worth of rehab, excluding the lead work, 5,000 to 25, and then 25 and above. So even though that pot of money is small, when we give properties and home dollars to an Alliance for Building Communities or to a housing association and development corporation, and they go in and rehabilitate a property, whether to sell to a low-income family or to rent, those properties, because HUD dollars were used to rehabilitate, have to be deemed lead safe. And in order for us to give their final check for that rehab, we get those tests done. So after 2004, any of the rehab we did in-house resulted in lead safe units. And if we look back, that's probably over 300 units since 2004 that we rehabilitated that were lead safe at the time of rehabilitation. And like we said, paint wears, the windowsills wear, the dust can create. But as our dollars were going in, those units were declared lead safe. So there is a period of, even though we only see that small pot, HADC gets funding every year to rehabilitate properties, Alliance for Building Communities, Habitat for Humanity, all of those agencies, any of our in-house rehabilitation results in lead-safe units.
$135,000 that we have, is that how you distribute it to the ABC, HADC? And
No,
that's an extra amount of money.
That's our money that.
But how do they get it? How do they, HADC and, ABC get their money? I mean,
well, for our CDBG process,
so
in a couple of months.
Do you tell them this money is to be used for this particular issue?
That the money is to be used to rehabilitate properties, but part of their contract states, and there's the HUD citation for the lead requirements, that they have to follow the lead rules, which would mean that they have to have a lead certified supervisor on the job, that they have to use lead safe work practices. And then when the unit is completed, they have to show that they had a follow-up lead testing, and that's done by an independent laboratory.
So there's in fact some kind of remediation there when they get the money.
Right, and there's proper terms between remediation and abatement, lead-free and lead-safe. We can say our units are lead-safe.
Yeah, just went through that differentiation. I know that some of you have questions or comments.
I do, briefly.
Okay, go ahead.
All right, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just to go back to what you had mentioned, the 2,400 cases in Pennsylvania, and you mentioned we can't even determine if those are in fact in the city.
No, there's 2,400, and I believe it's 84, and I have the number right in front of me. That's the number of tests that Pennsylvania State Department of Health printed in their report of Allentown city kids who were tested. I can't be 100% sure that all 2,484 live directly in the city because of that shared zip code thing.
That's my question.
But
Is there a way to find that out?
the labs are mandated to report those tests to the Pennsylvania State Department of Health. So I know that there's all the labs that have tested 2,484 kids. What I am asking the Secretary of Health to do for me, and I don't know if it's possible, is to share that data so that I can dig into it a little bit further. I don't even know if they keep that data. They may just get an aggregate number of the the 5s, an aggregate number of the 9s, because it's only reportable to public health at 10 and above. So they may just get a number out of the lab of how many kids under the age of 7 were tested, and then I won't get anything any more specific. But if they have it available to them, I'd like to see that data, because I'd like to try to determine who's actually being tested. Are these kids that live in one particular geographic area? Now, in the report, they're showing the positives clustered, and it appears on the map that they've shared that the cluster is 18102. So if that's the case, those are Center City kids. And then that's a good representation then of Center City kids, but I also want to see, are those finger sticks or are those confirmed venous lead levels, so that we know what we're up against. And then I'd really like to see a better representation of the sample. I'd like to see us get tests from the east side and the west side, and and then look at what we're seeing. Are we seeing this reflective of the housing stock everywhere, of the housing stock in Center City, of what are we looking at? But with them just releasing that number of 580 some tests, I can't speak to who those kids are.
Okay, and that you're on the right track, and you're gonna be reaching out and hopefully.
I'm gonna be reaching out. And again, when we had control of 1,000 tests in the city, when we were the testing agency, I could ask those, I could tell you that, I could whittle that down, and this program plan book that I give you guys every year has our lead data historically back, and I could delve into it more. But now, we're not the testing agent, so when that aggregate number comes out, when they choose to release it, like they just released 2014s, then I don't know how to interpret what they're giving me, because it's not clear enough to me exactly what that sample reflects.
We have as many questions as answers.
Yeah, we really, really, truly do.
All right, thank you.
Anybody else? Please.
I would just like to make a comment. First of all, thank you so much. The report was educational and one of the best reports out there. And I agree with you, Mr. President. The night this report came out, we had a half a dozen panicked people. Where are they tonight? We have a pediatrician here to answer questions. We have everyone that you can possibly answer a question to. And they're not here. So I certainly hope they're streaming, and thank you so much. It was educational and very informative.
And we're available. If anybody has questions, we're available.
What I would request is, first of all, if you can give us a summary. I almost feel like we gotta use the media for this a lot more, because they went over and spread this news all over, that we had this high level of children with high blood level, and now they're not, we got trouble here, but we can use them to spread the news on how to take care of it, because we just don't have the dollar amount.
Well, and I'll be honest, we have a problem with that. We used to have consistent media attendance at our Board of Health meetings that are open to the public. We always had follow-up stories from each of the Board of Health meetings where we go over topics just like this in depth, and we try to determine the course of action. We no longer have any media representation ever at those Board of Health meetings, and when we send out press releases and flyers, it's very, very difficult to get attention to public health issues at this point in time. I did not have any requests for information come to me through this whole topic.
My favorite WFMZ reporter, Hillary Lane, is over there, so she's here.
And they have the camera.
Yeah, and the camera, so you're gonna give us some good coverage tonight, right?
Yeah, and I do have a few questions. I don't know if you would rather me ask.
Well, let's wait to that,
Yeah,
let's wait afterwards.
Yeah.
But a lot of the inaccuracies were, we got the facts, the data, data statistics is what it is. I just want to thank this nice lady for sharing your story. You're very welcome, and come back anytime. We don't care if you live in Bethlehem, come back anytime.
If I can help Allentown out, I'd gladly do it.
And the doctor, just don't send us an invoice. But seriously, thank you for coming, and we'll get the contact information. But Mr. Green, go ahead.
Thank you.
If I could just add, Mr. O'Connell, he's a pediatrician. You're well out of his range.
Hey, relax. I'll take any of you on. Outside later.
Anyway, anything else that you want to share with us before we close the meeting?
I don't think so. I just want to encourage parents who do have questions. If they are watching streaming or if it is covered in the media, they can contact us with questions about lead at any time. And, you know, I get to sit here and I get to tell you the story of lead, but the staff behind me lives the story of lead every day. Gary and the sanitarians, Belle and the nurses, and Judy and Jeff, who's a subject matter expert in our environmental group. So those people are literally pounding the streets on this. And it's very, very difficult when we have folks who say the city gave up its lead program or the city no longer cares about lead. This is an ongoing issue, and we aren't going to conquer this anytime soon, so we aren't going to stop doing this anytime soon.
I don't think, I don't think people were saying that the city gave the program. I particularly sort of sent an email to the mayor and said what happened to the program, to the money that we had. And we had a lot more money before, okay? So I did that myself, but I said, hey, look, I don't hear as much about it, but you do it in a different way because we just don't have the money.
Well, that's a lot different. I honestly believe since health departments in Pennsylvania have stopped investigating lead, I think it's an assumption that we have, and we have not. That's what I was referring to. I'm referring to the fact that the Allentown Health Bureau has never stopped investigating cases of lead reported to us at 10 or higher. That's what I'm referring to. Okay. That program has never ceased.
All right, that's good to know. And it's good to also have you and explain how you're doing this. I think we need to do more, and it's just an issue of money. And I think if the Department of Health helps us, it will make a big difference in our community. But I also like the idea, if you can get that map of where these children with high blood level,
I want the actual data. I want the line by line by line data, so I can plot that out and go from there. And if I can get it, I will. Before we close, I do want to mention though that we have a flyer in the back that pertains to an upcoming educational session that'll be held here in council chambers on another pressing public health issue we have, and that's heroin and opioid abuse. And we have a really good presentation on March 14th, and I put flyers in the back, and Mike took flyers for each of you, that we're trying to drum up some community support to hear more about that information, and that's a program done by the Center for Humanistic Change. And it actually features in that video parents, local parents right here who have gone through the pain and suffering that's connected, and some advice that we're giving to folks to recognize signs and symptoms. So I put the flyers in the back for those who are here.
But I want to say thank you to Mr. Dockery for putting this together. He actually was the person behind making sure that this happened tonight. Vicky and Jeff and Angela and Heidi and everybody else who's here, Pat, Bell over there, and everybody who came, Doctor, and thank you for coming, and Miss, forget your name, sorry.
Renee.
Thank you very much for coming, and yes, and the media who's here as well for covering this. I hope you do as good as a great coverage that you did before to this presentation as well. Well, thank you very much all, and this meeting is adjourned.